everybody. This is T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we continue our discussion on mindfulness on the ChangeGrid. And so last time around, we talked a lot about different philosophies, concepts, approaches, definitions of mindfulness and mindfulness and meditation and lots of variations along the way. Well, today, what I'd like to do is pick up where we left off last time around, and that was this understanding that these pursuits, whether it's mindfulness, meditation, being centered, finding peace and harmony, whatever set of descriptors you want to use to describe that experience, it occurs most readily at the center of the ChangeGrid. So I want to talk a little bit about how can someone deliberately move themselves to the center. And once they get to the center, what happens there initially? And then how do they go about rising, if you will, off of the surface of the ChangeGrid? So instead of just being on the surface at the coordinate 6, 6 in the center of the ChangeGrid, what happens as you begin to detach from that situation? What happens as you begin to step an inch above the ChangeGrid, a foot above the ChangeGrid, several feet? How far away from that reality of the ChangeGrid can you move as you go about separating yourself? And as you separate yourself from whatever is going on in your reality, how does the experience change? And what are the benefits of that? So I know I just gave you a whole lot of stuff to think about, but that's the whole idea, that it's one thing to get to the center of the ChangeGrid, but that is not our final destination. That is our launch point. So, okay, so with that, I'll ask you guys to go ahead, feel free, unmute, share anything you might like to share as a way of getting this kind of conversation going. So do you guys resonate with what I'm saying there about getting to the center of the grid is where the work actually begins? So go ahead, Brian, you've just unmuted.
Yes, when I thought about this, after we last met, I thought about this idea of, like, in martial arts, we call them, or it was called, different orientation points. So it's kind of like you orient yourself to whatever stimulus is coming at you. So you learn not to resist it, because then you're not positioned to best utilize your energy. Right. So I see that in the same way. So, like, you would put these blindfold on us, and you're going to get attacked, but even when you get attacked, you have that same jolt of, adrenaline going. And so you can't take control over that if you're thinking about it too much. And so you orient yourself to that, what's going on in the moment. And from there on, as you said, that becomes the entry point, both invitation and opportunity to further expand.
And so here you are blindfolded, you're in the middle of the mat, and there is one or more assailants around you, but you don't know where they are. You don't know how they'll come at you. You don't know when they'll come at you. And so tell us about the experience in that very moment. Is it more about you deliberately tapping into other senses, or are you tapping into a totally different plane?
Yeah, it's more like taking the sensory capacity of that adrenaline rush, because you do kind of feel like that, like you get this fear,
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I'm captured,
Well,
and
yeah,
we're
you're about
taught
to
to
be
breathe.
attacked.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're taught to take control over the breath, so that it's helping the body to pull itself back inward towards this centeredness. And then from that perspective, you use the momentum of the energy that's being applied in your favor. So it's this whole sensory rich thing of mind body coming together. But
Interesting.
that sensory, because we forget how to use our senses sometimes, like all the totality of it. Like when we're talking about these intangible things, intuition, imagination, the creativity, these are things that, from a neuroscience perspective, you're always taught to use shape those things for, relevancy, for application, for meaning, purpose, that kind of stuff.
Mhm, mhm.
And you do that in real time.
And so I'm kind of curious, sticking with your martial arts metaphor here, what is the ultimate level of achievement in that state? So there you are again, you're blindfolded, etc. Is there something like physically dissociating yourself from it or being able to project yourself out of your body to observe what's going on in other ways? I mean, where does this actually end up if you have perfected this technique?
You're totally detached, and it's almost like I can remember my Sifu saying, yeah, it's almost like you're detached and you're observing, you're looking into a window to observe yourself, your reactions and your response. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how you know if you're captured by the moment or if you're using that moment for what it is,
Interesting.
the opportunity to expand.
Interesting. Okay, good. Chris, you've unmuted. What would you like to add? Oh, Chris just muted himself again. All right. Okay. So now just changing things a little bit. Kathy. Oh, wait, no, Chris, you're unmuted again.
Yeah, I hit the space bar by mistake, but I did like one of the word choices that Brian mentioned when he talked about orientating yourself, because in the military, when we would be dropped off into an area, we could be dropped off into an area, given a map, and then one of the first rules that you learn is first you got to identify where you are before you can get to your location. So in order before knowing how to get to the center, you got to identify where are you. So where am I on this grid, so that I could begin that process of outlining what maneuvers I need to do to get there.
Excellent.
Mhm.
All right. So, Kathy, if you could unmute for a second, I want to ask you something on the from the meditation sort of angle. So, thinking about something similar to what Brian has described, there's an entry point to the meditative state, but what's the ultimate? If someone is fully, fluent in, achieved in, whatever the ultimate is in the world of meditation, how is that state characterized?
Well, I mean, there are different objectives to meditation. So some people might meditate for the sake of pure relaxation. Um, Other people, I meditate in order to connect with a higher level of consciousness.
Hmm.
So when I do that, what I'm looking for and what I'm by placing myself first in a relaxed state and then um, essentially visualizing, what I'm doing is connecting first of all with my higher self and then a creative force. So ultimately what I want to be able to do is co-create what I want and need to do next. So for me, mostly, I mean, not always, but most of the time, meditation for me is the opportunity to co-create with a higher level of consciousness, so that I'm actually acting in a way that is for the best for myself and for others around me.
And characterize this higher level of consciousness for you personally, and or for um, the uh, the whole
Well,
world of meditation in general.
well, I mean, I can feel an energy, I can
Wait,
feel.
well, let me just throw this. Is the energy another aspect of yourself, or is the energy an external energy that you're able to join with?
Well, it's both. It's an energetic. It's a broader energy, spiritual energy that I can feel in my body, and uh, that allows me to actually hear. I know this is going to sound crazy, so that's why I don't really talk about it very often. So that you can hear basically, you know, you can get answers for questions you might ask.
Okay, and this is a safe space. If there was ever a call you could talk about this on, you feel free. So, but is this? I'll give you some options, then you decide to this. Is this communion with your God concept? Is this communion with all of the spirits of Earth, past, future?
It's a lot of different things. It can be all of the above. I mean, it depends on what you're intending. It can be your higher self, which is a higher level of consciousness of yourself. It can be with a prime creator spirit. It can be with a broad energy of Earth consciousness. I mean, it can be a whole range of different things, depending on what you want. And sometimes you don't intend it and it just happens. Sometimes it just happens to you and you can feel it. But what it allows you to do is find an element of creativity in yourself, so that when you leave that meditation, you have a sense of peace, you have a sense of love, you have a sense of oneness, and a sense of joy, that and actually some direction on how you want to move forward. And so it's quite creative, you know, and it's quite action oriented. That it allows you to then move toward power. I mean, it really does allow, when I don't always achieve that. That's a very hard thing to achieve. But when I'm able to achieve it, I'm able to move into that place of power on the grid.
Interesting. Well, let me share something that I experienced, and you can tell me if this resonates with what you're describing. But this is years and years ago, right around the same time that I was developing the ChangeGrid. I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the New Age whole community was in its heyday, and all that was going on. And I was part of a couple of different little discussion groups and all that good sorts of things that was going on. And there was this one guy, and I never really did any deeper study, and he was talking about, but he kept talking about that through his meditation, he was able to tap into the Akashic record. Has anyone on the call heard of the Akashic record?
Yeah. I mean, the Akashic record is, I mean, I've never tapped into it. I know people who have or say they have.
Yeah.
And so, but for those who
that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, apparently there is this, how do I want to describe it? This universal database of all knowledge, all insight, all understanding, all everything. And it's referred to as the Akashic record. And when you are able to tap into this Akashic record, all answers to all questions are readily available. And so I always thought, like, well, that's really handy. What does this look like? Now, mind you, this was before there were word processing systems sitting on people's desks. This predates any kind of computer, any kind of internet. I mean, this is before any of that all got started. So people were already talking about this concept of being a singular database, if you will, that contained all knowledge, past, present, and future, all wisdom, all of it. And so he characterized that as being the ultimate state, was being able to tap into it. And me, knowing nothing, said, well, it would seem to me that there would be a higher level than that, and that is utilizing whatever you are. I mean, what are you going to the Akashic record for? It must serve a purpose, and that purpose must be in order to explore, do, achieve whatever, something beyond whatever. And you know, I think I was just taking different drugs than he was, but nevertheless. Yeah. Okay, thoughts about that? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that sounds really powerful. I think in all the schools I've been to are all, you know, religious based, like Catholic schools and that kind of thing. And you study all these various religions and spiritual kinds of concepts from all around the world. And I think what I get from that is there is this completeness, I think, that comes in any given moment. So there's this reconciliation. That's what I took from what you were just describing. Like that moment has its own completeness. And I remember, you know, all these gurus that's been in my life from martial arts and on used to always say these things like only complete action has a power to teach you completely. And I used to hear this kind of stuff and like, I don't even know what you're talking about, but it sounds really fascinating. But, you know, they talk about this idea that we're complete, but yet, or we're perfect, but yet being perfected, because the word perfect actually means complete. So, but yet there's a completion that comes where we're always continually evolving and developing. I think that's, to
And
me, that's
so
where it
then,
goes with the creativity.
by definition, are we ever perfect? Are we ever complete?
Right. So, and I don't think that we ever are, but you know, like these religious kinds of things assumes that one can get there. But to me, it's almost seems like the thing that we define, if we have the capacity to define it, we can control it. So that to me, sense there's something's not aligned there.
Well, right. And I think this gets back to our discussions on spiral dynamics. You know, we can only, how do I say, aim for, talk about, explore the levels of the spiral that we can imagine. It may very well be possible that the truth is that as we achieve higher levels on the spiral, that we are able then to see even higher levels on the spiral.
Right.
So who, you know, we're always going to benefit from our clarity of our insights. We're also always going to suffer from our blind spots. And I don't know what I don't know. I can't see what I can't see. So who knows what's really out there above and beyond. But this is one thing I kind of want to bring back to what Kathy was saying. And Kathy, I'm just taking one little piece out of what you shared, but Kathy was talking about how what she's trying to achieve through her meditation, it depends on what she's trying to accomplish or what she's working on at that point in time. And Kathy, you can correct me if that wasn't a fair paraphrase. But so I think that she was touching upon something I think is really important as we talk about working with clients or working with ourselves, moving to the center of the change grid, and then getting to work on what happens at the center of the change grid or could happen in the center of the change grid. So I wanted to talk about this continuum. Hi there.
T?
Yes. Yes, I'm here. Am I back yet? Am I back? Hello?
You're back.
Oh,
Yep.
thank you. Oh, I was going like, please don't give me a repeat of last week. So, all right. So what I was saying was that
What happened last time, guys, when the webinar just cut out? Did T explain that?
I don't know, because he cut out and I didn't see.
You guys, this is, I just joined the call, and I think last week when I joined the call, the same thing happened. So I'm going to get out of the call, and I'll go tell T to stop talking because I can hear him still talking. And if everybody can come back in, give me 30 seconds.
Well, do you want us to go out too?
Okay, just a second. I can hear T saying something in here.
T?
Okay.
everyone just needs to stay on the call. Everyone just needs to stay on the call. Just give me a sec. I need to find how to unmute myself.
Do you want me to back out?
No, I don't want you to back out. I want everything to just stay. Okay, you guys should hear me now.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, wow. Yeah, so Linda, just so you know, somehow you've joined the call again as me.
No, I didn't.
I'm looking at what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
It shows two panelists, both with my name.
right.
So it's happened again. So it doesn't really matter. I can edit all that out. Let me get back, and we're still recording, so all is good. So all right, so basically what I was saying is that, we're working with our clients, or we're working on ourselves, and talking about how we get to the center of the change grid. And once we get to the center of the change grid, how do we go about, I guess I got to be sharing my screen again. Okay, here goes. All right, fine. How do we go about getting to do the work that really needs to be done? And what Kathy had been saying in her, and this is where I said, Kathy, correct me if my paraphrase is wrong, but Kathy had mentioned that when she sits down to meditate, what she's trying to do changes. It really depends on what's going on. And that's why I wanted to just say that where we move from the center of the change grid off the surface of the change grid to whatever degree of detachment we go for has to be dictated by its usefulness to us in that moment. It is not necessary for us to achieve a level of mindfulness, meditation, psychic abilities. We don't need to tap into the Akashic record. We don't need to be able to perceive in vivid detail assailants surrounding us when we're blindfolded. We just need to achieve whatever level of detachment serves us for whatever it is we're trying to accomplish at that particular point in time.
Mhm.
Do you guys kind of agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it may very well be that the majority of the possible levels of detachment, etc., are beyond any of us ever achieving, because we're not willing to put the effort into developing that level of proficiency with our practice or whatever. But we got to know, no, there's a certain usefulness that we're looking for when it comes to this detachment. You guys all right with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So then that's going to bring up two questions for us. And the one is something you're looking on the screen right now. Right now, these are randomly listed. But I'd be curious to say, is there a progression of adjectives, a progression of descriptors that we can use to describe how detached are we? Are we at the center of the change grid? How do we know we're at the center? And how do we kind of know that we're moving up or away off the surface, above, whatever direction you want to characterize it in? Is there a progression of adjectives that we might be able to put together that would prove to be useful? And then the second thing, which is perhaps even more important, is what is the method that allows us to do that? And that's on the last slide that I want to show you guys. So we'll get to that in just a short while as well. So, all right. So do you guys agree that as someone uses the center of the change grid as a new launch point, that there is some usefulness in doing so? Why would someone do that? So I'm throwing that now as a question to all of you guys. And if you remember last time around, I said, look, we accidentally go through the center of the change grid countless times. That's not it. I mean, there's going to be times as you go through your day, you're going to end up at 6-6, and it's not going to even grab your attention. But let's say we're trying to do something deliberately. Why do you think anyone would ever want to or benefit from moving to the center of the change grid? Plenty of potential answers are on screen in front of you. So
I have to say it's awareness.
awareness. So tell us about that. Awareness of.
Well, I almost wanted to call it a calm awareness. Kind of like you're in a space of calm and awareness, and you're just with it. You're just present in it.
Mhm.
And I would suppose that state would have to be achieved before you could make a decision as to whether or not you're going to move.
Okay. And so um, what would the purpose be of using this awareness state? How is that different
Well,
than just living?
you're rarely there. I mean, and especially if it's intentional, you're rarely there. And you probably would want to make use of that.
Okay. All right. Good, good, good. All right. So anyone else want to throw anything in before I throw in 2 cents?
I have a problem with the kind of progression that you're describing here. I mean, just because it's, I don't know, it feels, you know, way too manufactured or what, and I don't think it's necessarily accurate. So that's, you
Is
know,
it the one? Yeah, the one you're looking at on screen.
yeah.
Oh, these
yeah.
are all totally random. These are just
Yeah,
words that people have
okay,
thrown out.
good. Oh, good. All right. Okay.
Yeah, the goal is to try to simplify this and put them in order. So, yeah. So, all right, but you know, David brought up the point. Well, one of the reasons why people may find the center of the change grid useful to them is because of how being in the center of the change grid impacts your awareness. So my question for all of you is, how does being in the center of the change grid impact your awareness, and how might that be useful?
Well, I would think it would reduce the noise.
Okay.
You know, you'd have more control.
Excellent.
Your awareness is, it's more about being open
Yep.
of a range of different kinds of awarenesses. I mean, you know, there, when you talk about awareness, it's not just mental awareness, it's physical, it's sensation, it's noise, it's sound, it's a range of different things that you can be aware of, and in that state, you're capable of tuning into sort of a mental, physical, emotional, spiritual kind of awareness, and that gives you the opportunity to then get balanced. And so for me, the notion of balance and alignment is really critical in that. And from that place of balance and alignment, which is very hard to achieve, but from that place of balance and alignment, then you can see, using the term see very broadly, see things more clearly, and then be in a position to then take action.
That sounds a lot to me like being the difference between being at peace as opposed to actually pursuing peace or the pursuit of it, right? Because to me, the being at peace, you can do those things that Kathy said because you're operating out of this expanse of this awareness, the expanse of who you are, as opposed to operating at your expense.
Yes.
All right, let me throw this in again. If you guys are looking at your screen right now, you'll see that I brought up the engagement rings. The exact center of the change grid is in the awareness band, about as close to the center of the awareness as you can get, based on the way the whole grid system works out. So there you are. You're centered in awareness. Now, that is awareness free of intention. That is awareness free of judgment. That is awareness free of anything else that might steer you or whatever. It really is just, I like this idea about, Kathy, I think you said about being open to what's going on. You are there as a sponge, if you will, fully, let's say, noticing everything, but just allowing it to enter your aware. I was trying to find another word than awareness, but just naturally enter your awareness. Go ahead, Chris. I think you were going to say something.
Yeah. So is it that it's because you become the observer?
And that becomes the question. In order to become the observer, am I still on the surface of the change grid, or might I now be floating an inch off the surface?
Might be.
Yeah, I'm just going, like, for me to truly observe without intention, without judgment, without whatever, simply observing what's going on all around me in every direction you can go. I probably need to not be in my moment, in my life's moment, in, living whatever is really happening in the world around me. I needed to separate myself just a slight little bit, perhaps, maybe a little bit more to that. Kathy, does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what comes to mind is a samurai warrior, a special forces person, in addition to those of us who are just plain citizens, but those people who are operating in danger and need to think very, very clearly, they go to that place. I would imagine that they go to that space where they go above so that they can completely detach from that range of incredible energy that they're surrounded with, and step out of it for a moment, and make choices, and then just step back in.
Right. And that's it. So after I've had a period of this observation to build my awareness, a question mark now arises. And that question mark is, does anything need attention? Does anything merit any additional thought, deeper exploration, whatever? Now I'm formulating a bit of an intention that could very well get me engaged in doing whatever needs to be done. So a lot of what may come out of that awareness that comes from the center of the change grid could very much help me to take the right actions at the right time in order to achieve whatever it is that I'm looking at. Now, that awareness might also expose an immediate threat in my environment, in which case, rather than moving out grid, although fight does exist out grid, I may very well be moved up grid. And now it's like my tension is taking over. My emotions are becoming more of the ruling factor than my logic really was. You guys with me on that? So something in my awareness might suddenly expose that threat and could escalate my level of tension very quickly up to upper power stress, even stress, where now I just want to flee, get out of it as best I can.
But the key is in that situation to really be that person who can act effectively, is to not allow fear to take over, which is what happens on the upper part of the grid. It's characterized by fear, right?
Right. This is reaction.
So what in order to operate effectively, to me, the highest form of consciousness is the ability to stay out of fear in a sense of trust during times of extreme volatility.
Yes.
Hey, T. So
Mhm.
it brings me back, what Kathy is saying. It brings me back to that phrase of, isn't that interesting? So you could see the fear, you could observe the fear, but you don't have to participate with it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So
And
what that means is the idea of if you're overwhelmed by the fear, then you're identified with it, right? So it's like it's impossible to separate that from the identity itself. Because we said openness, you're not necessarily attached to the identity as you would if you're in that fear state. I would think not, right? Does that make sense?
Well, I think you're right. Let me throw this in and then you guys can factor it in. But keep in mind that anything that's happening up grid is a reaction. And anything that's happening out grid is more like a deliberate action. Maybe it's proactive, whatever it is. But this is coming from a place of internal resolve. And this is coming from a place of absolute emotional survival skill reaction sort of stuff. So to Kathy's point, this is not where we want to live. We don't want to operate out of fear. Well, or any of the other upgrade emotions that are coming along there. All those are going to distort reality and ultimately take our attention away from the logic that's readily available in any situation. May not be complete logic, but there's enough, and we need to be able to, gauge and utilize whatever's there. So again, we want to say that anyone who's using the oracle of the self, or anyone who's doing this kind of work, we are really preparing them to be more effective as they move out grid. We're really helping them to avoid or at least diminish the reactivity that comes from being too far up grid. And by the way, there's also the inactivity of being too far down grid, which could actually be infinitely more dangerous in the long term or costly in the long term. Obviously, upgrade stuff is dangerous in the moment, but a long habit of doing absolutely nothing is sooner or later going to take tremendous toll on, you know, on your life, etc. Yeah. So,
Yes.
so I like what you've all been saying about this idea that awareness is what is one of the things that's coming out of being in the center of the change grid. Now, again, there's some other things that are coming into play here as far as adjectives you guys have thrown out as you've described that section. So there's a quietness, a calmness, that we talked about being observant there, centered, mindful. There's all these great words. And what I'm trying to get across in this little part of the exercise is that all of these words may very well occur at the center of the change grid, but they do not all occur simultaneously.
Hmm.
Right? And again, you guys feel free to chime in, say, well, maybe. I think that some of these, to achieve some of these adjectives requires perhaps more time, more practice, more whatever to support me in achieving this adjective or this level of detachment, this level of, you know, being in the center of the change grid. You guys with me? Yeah? No? Yes?
Mhm.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And again, we only want to go as far up as is useful to us. I mean, if you're just doing it as a personal practice, well, then that's useful to you. But in general life, we just want to go up far enough to be useful. And
Hey,
so
T,
that, yes, go right ahead.
okay, so is it possible a part of the conversation is internal and external forces? Because if external things can push, can change all of this, or is it just our focus on what we can do internally?
Oh, no, no, no. And to your point, I think you're actually opening up multiple things that we could say about that. Certainly, Kathy's our resident expert on the evolution of meditative state, but I did open up, well, you did. I'm going to slide this into the page. You are, I mean, you know, it's not, we're the circle of brilliance. It's nice that everybody brings a certain chunk of brilliance with them. So that's great. Now, this little document comes from theartofwellbeing.com. I have no idea who Razan Hussein is. None of that at all. I just thought this was interesting. The 10 stages of meditation, according to Kuladasa. What the heck is Kuladasa, Kathy?
I don't know.
There you go. So who knows? Based
So
on
much for the
books.
resident expert, T. So I don't.
Well, but well, let's just say that relatively speaking, you seem to be the one who knows what they're doing. Okay. All right. So blah, blah, blah. The mind illuminated. Oh, so there's meditating, a complete meditation guide integrating Buddhist wisdom and brain science for greater mindfulness. You know, when the title of your book expands to 3 lines, you need to rethink things just a little bit. Okay. So they said there's 10 stages of meditation. And I'm not going to drag you through those, but one of them has to do with dealing with distractions. Here it is. At stage 7, now you're getting to be a skilled meditator. Exclusive attention, the ability to select and maintain a specific object or objects of attention in the face of distracting or competing stimuli. So part of that is very subtle, but I'll also tell you that if you are doing your meditation practice and suddenly your smoke alarm goes off, I promise you this is going to interrupt your meditative state. And if it doesn't, that meditative state no longer proved useful to you. So, right. So Kathy, what about trying to tune out distractions? Obviously that takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And I think that's, I mean, it's incredibly difficult. I've done it, you know, I've done it. I've actually gone into a space where I'm not aware of what's going on around me. I mean, absolutely not aware of anything that's going on around me. But I also know I'm in a safe space. So, and one of the things when my teacher used to say that we should be able to make it, I'm an East Coast person, you know, we should be able to meditate in Grand Central Station. In other words, you know, and I've tried it actually, you know, we should be able to meditate in Grand Central Station, which means we should be able to make a connection with a higher level of consciousness by you know, just being able to isolate and tune out the activity that's going on around you. Now that also requires you to believe that you are being protected when you're in that state.
Yeah.
So that, you know, a mass murderer isn't going to come along and stab you in the back while you're in that process of doing that. But, you know, absolutely. I mean, part of one of the goals for me of meditation is to be able to live a more effective life, because that's what we do. We are living human beings. We are living our lives. So if there are things that we need to be aware of in the outside world, like a smoke alarm or a nut job that's about to kill you or whatever it is, or a car accident,
Right.
you know, that part of that meditative state is to allow you to see that. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, because Edie will probably unmute on this one, but Edie, you can tell us the how it all works, but even in a deep hypnotic state, your survival instincts are still fully operational, right?
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, because there's a fair amount of abuse of hypnotherapists, you know, take off your clothes. It happened at UW, you know, at universities, wherever, is that a real smart to abuse it is that you say you're getting hotter and hotter. You don't say take off your clothes, because there's a governor that'll say, no, I'm not going to do that. But if you make it internal and say you keep feeling hotter and hotter, where they make that internal choice, you can still be abusive. And for some reason, Kundalini keeps coming to mind. Does that have anything to do with what we're talking about when the chakras are wide open? Is that related to this at all?
I remember studying Kundalini yoga.
Yeah.
There's definitely a receptivity that comes along with it, but I don't remember anything about, I guess I don't know of any of these approaches, any of these practices that are going to render your survival instincts inoperative.
I was taught that Kundalini yoga is actually quite dangerous, because by opening up your chakras to that degree, you are unprotected from other energy that you can't see or hear or feel, and that you're not protected. And so I've never played with Kundalini. People talk about it. It's like, you know, some people think it's cool, whatever it is. You can open yourself up so much that you're actually in danger. You're actually in peril.
Yes. And that reminds me, God, I think this goes back to the 70s when I first started in private practice. There was somebody that had Kundalini experiences all the time. And most classical psychologists, psychotherapists know nothing about it, to tell you the truth. And she had it in my office, and it is the strange, I mean, it freaked me out. It was almost a cross between a seizure and a psychotic experience. And so I totally agree with you, Kathy. If you weren't psychotic before and you are not grounded well, I honestly think it could flip you into that. So that's
And I know somebody who did that. I mean, they just
I just Googled Kundalini yoga criticism, and it's amazing how many stories are describing exactly what you guys have just shared. So, okay, anyway, let me show you guys my last little slide here, because this is what I want to be able to finish up on Thursday if possible. Yes, it would be nice to put this progression of adjectives together, because I do think that if we can say there are stages that you can work your way through from the center of the change grid. And each stage has a certain usefulness to you. So for example, if I said, and I'm not sure, I haven't really done this as an exercise, this is what the Circle of Brilliance is for. Let's say that if nothing else happens at the center of the change grid, you're going to be calm. Okay, being calm all by itself has a certain usefulness to it. And so, but if you want to go like, I just don't want to be calm, I now want to be aware. Well, maybe that means I need to step up a little bit. And so if we can find a way to make this practical, I'll feel like we've done something that has contributed to the understanding of the pursuit of mindfulness and meditative practices as well. And what I did was I just started throwing this together, and I don't know if I want to call it the progression of detachment, but that's the word that kind of came up there. And again, this is what we would be saying to a client or helping our client walk through or do for ourselves. And it's very interesting that Kathy was talking about how you have to find a safe space. And by the way, Grand Central Station, I'm not so much a meditator as much as I'm a daydreamer. And so my mind just wanders because my mind wanders. I find, particularly in a foreign country, that crazy level of noise in train stations is to me white noise. It just zones me right out. So I'm not, because maybe it's, I don't understand the language, but to me, it's all just sound. And so I kind of go like, I can probably see how you could get adept at meditating in the apparent chaos of Grand Central Station. Yeah, it's all background noise.
T, is
Yeah.
that because it's what you know and you do? I had somebody here that lives in Manhattan, New York City, as a guest, and New York City's crime is off the chart right now. It's not a safe place. She's staying here for a few nights, but her hubby goes back to New York, and she doesn't feel safe here. So she wasn't here for the week, and she didn't feel safe. There has never been any crime ever on Kaiser Island. It's probably the safest place on earth. She feels safer in crime-ridden Manhattan. So is that part of what you're saying, that the familiar tricks us into believing we're in a safe?
I would agree. I would agree. I would agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So here's my little thought. And again, I just put this together in just a couple of minutes. So I'd like you guys to help flesh this all out. So there's a kind of a progression of behaviors, a bit of a practice. So the first one that I put out there was, well, you need to find your space. So is your space the yoga mat? Is your space a quiet room somewhere? Is your space sitting in a church? Is your space outside in the garden? Where is your space? And if you can find multiple suitable spaces, or you can even create for yourself a portable space, then even better. But I would say that if we want to work with someone on using that center of the change grid most effectively, one of the first things we have to do is talk about finding your space. What's the environment that we want to see if we can get ourselves into or create around us? Understand what I mean by finding your space?
Oh, absolutely.
Creating space, whatever. Now, pardon me. The second one is for me just out of the yoga, out of a lot of stress management kind of programs we've all been exposed to over time. Once I'm found myself in my space and I've decided that I'm going to, just be there for a moment, it seems that all the work now moves into breathing. And whether we are just trying to calm our breath, slow our breathing down, practice specific breathing patterns, whatever kind of breath work you want to do, it seems that in everything I can think of, part of the movement out of our day-to-day life into this practice, into this centered opportunity, involves a little bit of breath work at the very beginning of things. You guys agree with that? Is there something else that you do before you find your between finding your space and breathing, or what do you think? Breathing.
Absolutely. Breathing is critical. I mean, Brian knows all of this. It's about, reducing your cortisol. It's about, calming yourself, getting
Mhm.
into that. And that's what breath work does. Yeah.
So even if we just said, if we could help someone to find their space and to breathe intentionally, what are we doing as far as their movement on the change grid?
Down.
Down.
We could be moving them down if they're up grid.
Right. And you're moving them back center if they're out grid.
We're moving them in towards the center if they're in grid. I can also tell you that breathing invigorates. When you are too far down grid, when you're starting things like if you just woke up from a nap and decide you start or you from a night's sleep and you decide you start every day with your yoga, that breathing is actually going to energize you compared to where you were prior to. Whatever it happens to be. So I think that this intentional, deliberate breathing part of the practice or all these practices is about centering yourself, getting yourself to the middle of the change grid. It can be calming, it can be energizing. Yeah, it can be restorative, it can be intentional. So
And
yeah.
I think that's a really important thing to remember is that you're not looking for one outcome. You are looking for that center space depending on where you're coming from. And it's that, I mean, I'm not repeating anything different than what you said, T. I just wanted to emphasize that I think that that's a really important concept that most people don't really get. You know, they don't get it. And that's the value of the change grid, of having that image in your mind to be able to say, yeah, I could be coming from a whole different space, but breathing will bring me to that centeredness as opposed to, just down grid.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the body's reset button. So, again, we tend to get that in terms of, your mobile phone or something like that. You reset by turning it off and wait 15 seconds, turn it on. So the breath does exactly that for the body when it's intentional.
Yes, you said that's the whole point. Like at the end of every yoga class I've ever taken, the last pose is Shavasana, which is the corpse pose. You've been laying there for a good 5-10 minutes trying to emulate death as closely as you can. You're just laying there like a blob. And then when your yoga instructor wants to bring you out of that, she very, very calmly says, and now we return to the breath. And it's all about taking progressively deeper breaths. It's awakening the body through breath. And so that's definitely upgrade. Now, after we've done our little breathing bit, the next thing is about reducing sensory input channels. In yoga, this could be something as simple as closing your eyes. It could be something as simple as calm your body so that you're just, don't be flailing around, don't be fidgeting, don't be moving around. Just find quietness in your body. And so you sit with your legs folded and you have your hands resting on your thighs or wherever they happen to be. But something that just says, what can I do to reduce sensory input? And while very often practices have music involved with them, I find things best when the music either never changes or if there's no music at all. So, because again, I like this idea about reducing sensory input. Now, interestingly enough, once we've reduced all that sensory input, we now have an opportunity. And by the way, I should say external sensory input, if you will. So I'm closing my eyes to shut off that channel, and I'm hopefully reducing the amount of noise in my environment, whatever the case may be, calming down my body. Why? Because to me, the next thing that you'd want to do is to survey your body. And I think this is where we're getting into mindfulness. So now, in most yoga work, this whole surveying part is all about, now that you are in this nice centered place and everything is calmed down around you, notice what's going on inside of you. So is there tightness? Is there stress? Is there this? Is there that? What's going on? Do a little inventory of the body and what's going on. And as you do that, or once you've done that, the next step would be about targeted relaxation. So you might not even know during these first 3 steps of here that you're holding all this tension in your shoulders. But when you survey the body and say, oh my gosh, my shoulders really are pulled up, I can then do something to targeted to deliberately relax that. And so our goal by the end of these 5 places is that my mind is calm, my body is relaxed, I am clear in my channels. And now I think we can get into what they're actually saying mindfulness would be as that practice.
Mm-hmm.
So,
The
yeah.
comment I would make here is that I don't think the breathing ever stops.
Well,
I
right.
mean,
Yes. Yes.
I don't see this as like a step by step. I mean, I think it does happen gradually, but I think the breathing,
Yep.
it's like one is merging into the next, but the
Yep.
breathing is always happening because that's what keeps you.
Right.
A-
Well, in fact, I've had some yoga instructors describe it as being an additive experience. So you
Yes.
start with a space, now add to that your breathing, now add to that reducing sensory input, now add to that. So even as you adopt a new position, you're going to survey the body to find out, did that trigger any unnecessary muscle activity? Because if it did, I need to target it and relax that. In order to be able to benefit the most from the poses. So you're absolutely right. We're going through this as we work our way through this. Now, I think that leads then to this, what do we say? I want to be respectful, but this
Mhm.
rather shabbily defined thing called mindfulness. It seems that there's umpteen different definitions of it and ways people do it, but it seems like that's where that would kind of fit in. Now, allowing whatever thoughts to come through and to pass through without any kind of notice. And then, whatever that is. So you're mindful of it, it's all happening, but you're just letting it be. Okay, you
Mm-hmm.
guys okay so far? Because I want to give you this as your homework.
Yes.
Can I just say something when you were
Please.
talking about music though? Because a lot of times, okay, but when you use music to get into the meditative state, you have to use nonlinear music, what they often call new age or whatever. If
Yep.
you use something like classical, it stimulates the left brain and it takes you out of the alpha or theta state.
Yes.
So it's very important that it's just kind of like raindrops coming down. And then like Pachelbel's canon in D or Baroque music has the same rhythmical pattern as that alpha state, which is why, that music is promotes it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And well, for me personally, I can't handle music that has lyrics. So
Definitely, that's a distraction.
that's
Yep.
pulling me totally out of whatever's going on.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my thought. Now, again, I'm always looking for the practical application of this. And so I want to be able to say to my clients or the people that are learning about the Oracle of the Self, these are steps you're going to go through, but these are all steps of preparation for the real work to now begin. Now that real work to me is going to not be linear now. Now we need to make a choice. We're at a fork in the road that has at least 2 ways we can go. No doubt it could have many more. But I may say, I'm going to consult my Oracle. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
going the direction of consulting my Oracle, I am coming to myself, if you will, in this state of being centered and saying, I'm trying to figure something out. I'm trying to make a change. I'm trying to resolve an issue. I'm trying to do some sort of specific work. And from this state, I should be able to come up with more options, more insight about those options, more clarity, etc. We'll get into it in more detail, but I want to know if you guys feel that that is a different use of this state than saying that my state is on the one on the right now to reach a higher plane of consciousness. in which case I may need to start to focus on something in meditation, focus whether it's on an object or on a sound or on a single thought, get into that meditative state, and whatever it is that is beyond that meditative state. Last time we talked about people being able to do astral projections, send their spirit, send their mind anywhere else in the world, past, present, future, and see what's going on there. So who knows what's really going on there, but nevertheless, reaching whatever those higher and higher planes, that to me is a totally different path than the path of saying, no, I need to consult my oracle. I need to figure something out. Are you guys in agreement with me on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, but we can talk about that,
Okay. All right. Well, and it may very well be that by,
yeah. I don't think it's as clear cut us, but I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I mean, it's this difference between creating in the third dimension versus astral projection. I mean,
well, right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
think anyway, but go ahead.
Right. Well, and to me, that's my thought is like, again, going back to the usefulness question, do I need my clients to become highly skilled at meditation in order to then go and use the oracle, the self kind of approach for making better changes? Or does someone, before they can be good at meditation, have to understand all this stuff about self-application for change, personal change management, and etc.? Or are they two different sorts of approaches that may involve some similar steps along the way, but are nevertheless, they have a different intention, so there would be a different pattern or a different recipe, whatever you want to use for put there. And again, there might be several more that we just haven't really chatted about, but that's my thought. We want to create this state. We want to talk about where mindfulness comes into it. And my thought is that if I can create this state that ends up in mindfulness from that point, if I can view that as now being a jumping off point, I may stay in the mindfulness mode for whatever therapeutic reasons there could be. I may go and consult the oracle. I may go and do this thing for reaching a higher plane. Perhaps there's even some psychic abilities that I might tap into. And so now from this state, what I want to do is see if I can hear what ancestors are telling me, or see what, relatives, whatever, might be sharing with me. I don't know. I just know that great things can happen from the center of the change grid, but it isn't just about coincidentally landing there. It's about moving yourself there deliberately, getting the preparatory work taken care of, and then going in whatever direction best serves whatever your objectives were. Okay, is this interesting? Even though it's not very well formulated,
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Great.
Is it worth
the application?
Yeah. And that's it. Me, I'm more of a try to be practical whenever I can. I always want to know what's the practical application, and the more practical applications I can identify, sweet.
Yeah.
I think it's very helpful. I can see how, think about how like the gurus often teach this as, sometimes when you do this thing once, it's like set it and forget it. Like you don't ever come back to it, you don't evolve. And that's never the case when it comes to this kind of thing. When you're talking about mindfulness, you can always get deeper dimensions. And as Cassie said, that higher consciousness, there's no end product to that. Because it's almost like the athlete, you hear the starting gun and you do all this work to get to the finish line, then the starting gun goes off again. I was just reading about a study that says how humans tend to underestimate subtractive kinds of changes as opposed to addition. So we tend to think the more we add to things, that comes to change, where it's doing less of things that create the value, less of things that doesn't maximize energy. And we tend to undervalue that to more additional, the addition.
That's a great, I'd like to talk about that more next time.
Yeah, in fact, if you guys want to just remind me, that connects very much to what we said about the difference between things that are effective, things that are efficient, and things that are elegant. And this whole idea about elegance is about simplifying things. It's about removing anything that may very well be effective and may very well even be, more efficient, but by getting rid of it, it becomes more elegant. So something simple that helps you to achieve the outcome. So I like that whole idea about something being subtractive, because we all
Yeah, I'll
know
send you the study.
whose advice to women when they were getting dressed for a night out was to get yourself all ready, and then what are you supposed to do? You guys,
Oh, man.
ladies, do you remember? Linda, anybody? Remove one thing.
Oh,
Really?
Oh yeah, it was all like, yeah. So when you're trying to go for elegance, classic elegance is the simple black dress and the string of pearls. But
Right.
that means you might also have earrings on and a bracelet and a whatever. And they always say, no, when you're all done, you look in the mirror and now you get rid of one thing.
Right, absolutely.
So that's it. That's it. We want to simplify it. Okay, anyway,
What, Pete?
yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what her name was at the moment, but that's very famous, very, very
Yeah, one of
famous.
the most famous designers. I forget her name. You'd certainly all know. Did she do the simple black dress? Did she do Breakfast at Tiffany's? I don't know, but it's one of those era designers. Okay, anywho, thanks everybody for joining in. We will pick up where we left off on Thursday. So bye for now, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.